So today's a very special occasion because not only do I have makeup on, but we're actually going to be talking about planning for the future today. I make a lot of videos about side hustles and financial tips and tricks that you can do in the present moment, but I think it's really fun to take a look ahead and make a plan for yourself for the future to put yourself in a better position at the end of the next year. So today we're going to talk about the tips and the things you can do now to set yourself up to be in the position you want to be in next year with your finances. I love to talk about side hustles and money tips, so if that's something you're interested in, you should definitely subscribe, like the video, and turn on my post notifications so you can see every new video that I make. Let's just get right into the 7 things that you should do financially to put yourself in a good position for next year in 2026. So the first thing I want to start out with is review how much cash you have on hand at the end of the year. And all of the cash you want to add up is anything liquid. So anything in your checking account, anything in a savings account, a high yield savings account, or even just cash that you might just have in an envelope in your closet. You want to add up everything that you have that is liquid cash and anything that you can realistically get access to within maybe 3 business days maximum. So this is going to make up what your actual cash on hand is. And once you have this number, then you can use it to determine if it's enough, if it's too little, or if it's something you really want to focus on building for the next year. And that's how you make goals that will actually get you where you want to be and plan ahead. I only opened a high yield savings account about a year ago, which is kind of crazy. I can't believe I went this long without having one. So if you don't have one, open one now. Do not wait any longer. I used to be that person who kept a bunch of cash, and by a bunch, I mean a few $1,000s, so nothing crazy, but I would keep several $1,000s in cash in my checking account that I was not readily using for bills on everyday basis or just everyday spending, and this was a complete waste, and I want you to learn from my mistake. If you have money that's in your checking account that you're not using on a regular basis, that money should be in a high yield savings account, and this is what you want to do to not only keep the money there and tempt you to spend it, which is dangerous, but also the money in a separate account that separates the category in your mind that this is for a different purpose and it's not just sitting in my account to make me feel better. So take inventory of how much cash you have, whether it's savings for an emergency, savings for maybe a down payment on a home, or vacations, whatever things you may have been saving for over the past year, take account of how much you have for each of these purposes. And then when you move on to the goals step, you can actually determine whether or not you're in the position you want to be in, and then how to adjust from there. Maybe you've done really well and you can actually pull back on your savings rate because you want to reallocate that money towards something else. Maybe you really want to increase it by a couple percent because you thought you'd have more by the end of the year. So take account of all of the savings money that you have across all accounts and determine where you want to go from there. So the next step, obviously, is to do kind of the opposite and review all of your debts and liabilities. These could be things, how much is left on your car loan, personal loans you may have, credit cards. Those are probably the most common debts that people have. And sort these all out with the amounts and with the interest rates. You can do this literally on paper. You can write it in your phone. You could do it on an Excel sheet. I like to physically write things down or have things typed out, even if it's on a spreadsheet, in a very simple, easy to understand way. So what I would do is just create a new line item for every single debt or liability that you have. Do one column with the total and then one column right next to it with the interest rate that is currently on those. That should only take a few minutes to compile. And once you have that, you want to first just take inventory of what you're looking at. So where's your current position? Maybe how did it get better or worse from last year? Where are you standing now? How can you start tackling this debt over the next year? I like the idea of sorting them by interest rate and tackling the highest interest rate first. So usually that's probably going to be credit card debt. I would do that. There's obviously lots of different methods. You can do the debt avalanche method or the debt snowball method. So I say do the avalanche method and tackle the debt with the highest interest rate first, just because that does make the most logical sense. Yes, money is not always logical and there is a huge emotional aspect to money as well. But at least in this one example, when we're talking about debt, I say go for the highest interest rate debt first. Knock that down as quickly as possible. So the third thing you're going to want to do is review all of your assets and the performance over the past year. This will mostly be for stock performance. Review what you've made in the market over the past year, your contributions. to see where your assets stand now so that you can kind of roll this into the next step of figuring out what your net worth is at the end of the year. So this is why you want to do the 2 steps beforehand so you can really get to your net worth. And by the end of every year, you should know what your net worth is and have it tracked so you can see your year over year performance. And having that knowledge is probably one of the most important things to also just make you feel like you're in control of your financial situation. Even if you might be on paper or by numbers, a lot of people will feel as though they're out of control, and it's usually due to lack of tracking and kind of just letting things happen. Like they're not tracking their net worth, they're not tracking their asset performance. They're kind of just like letting it happen and then just seeing what position they're in as opposed to tackling it, getting ahead of it, and then planning so that the result they see is actually not surprising. It's what they planned for. So I say that's why you should track your net worth and know what it is at the end of every year. This next one is probably the most important step that you want to take besides figuring out your net worth and actually knowing what position you're in, is you want to focus on optimizing your biggest expenses. So for most people, this is going to be housing, so your rent or your mortgage, and then food and grocery costs. That's probably the biggest 2 things for most people. Third might be transportation, so a car payment, and then all of the other costs that go into having a car. So focus on these big categories instead of beating yourself up about how much avocados cost and if you should buy them at the store. I think a lot of people get caught up in these little expenses at the end of the day are not making or breaking their net worth, and all it's doing is taking up your emotional real estate that could be better used on things that matter more. If you can optimize, number 1, your housing costs or your rent, your mortgage, whatever situation you're in, if you can reduce that cost, you can automatically free up hundreds of dollars to then allocate to wherever you want. And that is the quickest way that you can tackle overspending if you're maybe in a position where you realize that your costs are just too high. This is actually something that I did recently. Is I moved into this apartment somewhat recently, a few months ago now. And before this, I had a really nice apartment in downtown in a high-rise building. And while I will say I do not regret living there because it was really cool for a short period of time, it was not by any means a smart long-term financial decision. And it was nice to live there in a very luxury place for a short time. But the important thing is to then pull back and readjust and allow yourself to have things during certain periods of life. But if I were to sit there and stay at that place for years and years, over time, that would definitely have accumulated to a lot of money wasted, you could say, on rent or more on expensive rent, I will say. Do not think that renting is throwing away money. I could make a whole nother video about that I cannot even get into that now. But that was throwing away a lot of money on rent because it was more of a luxury building. So this is actually something I did somewhat recently where I tackled my housing costs first. After writing everything down, I have a whole spreadsheet that I use. It's actually pretty simple, but by looking at those main categories, I was looking at how much my housing was as a whole. So this was rent, parking, I had a storage unit, all the utilities that the building was charging on top of my own utilities. It just added up to be way too much. And I decided, okay, enough is enough. When my lease is up, I am moving somewhere and I am reducing my cost by a few $100s every month. That was definitely one of the best decisions I've made because I automatically freed up almost $400 a month just by moving when my lease was up. I didn't break my lease, so I didn't have to worry about costs or anything like that. I just decided that once my lease was up, I was going to move to somewhere cheaper. And I'm really glad that I did it. I literally ended up saving almost $400 a month that was now just feels like free money that was just magically available because you get used to living on whatever rent you were that was kind of constraining you, right? Because that's your biggest cost. For most people, rent or a mortgage is your biggest cost. So if you reduce that, it kind of does feel like you found a loophole or you found free money that you can then use for something else. So that's my advice. I just did that recently and it worked out great. Maybe look into that, especially if you're a renter, and maybe look into when your lease is up, can you move somewhere more affordable? Also, just like the housing market, the rental market changes a lot. So maybe when your lease is up, then it's possible you could be in a more favorable rental market where maybe costs have gone down from where they were before. So look at that expense and really see if you can tackle that. And then next, I would go for food and groceries. Can you reduce eating out a little bit? Can you optimize your grocery costs? Yes, you can still go out to eat. You don't need to prevent yourself from having fun. But a big thing is the groceries. If you are really strategic with your grocery shopping, buying things that are on sale, couponing, going the extra mile in that sense, you can severely reduce your groceries on a monthly basis. And over the year, that will add up to serious money that you can free up to then put towards savings or investments or whatever you might want to put it towards. And then you also free up yourself to stop getting mad at yourself over little costs that are $5 decisions that are just taking up time in your brain, like gnawing at you for no reason. The next thing you're going to want to do before 2026 is review your bills. Big ones I'm thinking of here are cable, internet, and auto insurance. These are big ones that I've actually personally been able to reduce just by reviewing when my terms were up or calling and renegotiating or just asking if I could stay at a lower rate and being told yes. And I've even done some of this online too. My internet bill, for example, at my last apartment, which was down the street from where I live now, so it wasn't a big like location change, was $30 more a month. That doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm telling you that it felt like the biggest win to go from paying about $90 a month to about $60 a month for my internet service, just because I did some finagling in the app and called them and was able to figure out a plan that was cheaper. And I didn't even end up having to switch internet providers or even take a hit on the actual internet service or speed I was getting. So just by going out of your way to do a simple thing like that, like calling them, it was a huge savings for me, and it was actually pretty easy to do. And one that I'm actually going to be looking at again when my policy is up is my auto insurance, which in a couple months, my policy will be up, and I have been renewing it every 6 months kind of automatically. But this is a big one that even when I was writing down things for this video, I was thinking, is this something I need to do? And I'm like, yes, it definitely is. So that's something I'm going to be looking at again, is just doing some more research when my next billing cycle is up, which I believe is in a couple months. And I'm just going to be shopping around and just making sure that I can't get a better rate, or if I can get a better rate at other places, I'm just going to call my current place and see if they'd be willing to match it. Just doing some little steps like that can make really, really big differences. And if you're able to cut off $20, $30, $40 a month in a couple of these categories, all of a sudden you're going to have a few extra $100 a month that you didn't think you had. That's a really easy way to kind of find the money in your budget without having to do anything drastic to get it. So the next thing you want to do is calculate your savings rate. Calculate what your savings rate is based on your income for this past year, and then determine if you want to increase, decrease it, or keep it the same. And also, your goals may have changed over the years too. So really being proactive and asking yourself if your savings rate is enough, or if it's really not going to get you where you want to be in the next year. Get ahead of that and plan for it now. Maybe you've been saving 3% of your income, and maybe that's really not where you want to be because you want to buy a house in the next few years. Maybe your emergency fund is super low, or maybe you don't even have an emergency fund. Maybe you want to say, okay, I want to save 10% this year. Making these changes and being proactive is really what gives you that control over your money and gives you that also emotional stability, knowing that you have everything in check and you're going where you want to be. The last thing you want to do is review your employer's benefits and making sure that you're taking advantage of all the benefits that may be available to you. So make sure you're taking advantage of any 401k matches or maybe any HSA contributions that you could be having. Look into maybe open enrollment. A lot of times open enrollment is at the end of the year. So if you want to change health plans, maybe it's not optimized for where you want to be anymore. Maybe you want to change a plan, get an HSA if you don't have one, and then put those pre-tax contributions into an account like that. That could also really, really benefit you and plan for the next year moving ahead. So I hope you enjoyed this video and these 7 tips for what you can do to plan for financial success in 2026. If you like talking about side hustles, making money, and personal finance, then you should definitely subscribe because that's what I talk about here. So I will see you in the next video.